Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do a, I guess a padded applique is what I'd call it. It's something I've been doing myself, and I don't really see a lot of reference to it elsewhere, so I'm just going to go ahead and call it padded, maybe quilted applique. So what you're going to need to do is come up with a design that you want to applique onto something. You can do it a single or a double layer. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to applique with a little layer of foam. So this is actually bra padding. You can get very thin neoprene also. I think that's actually technically what this is. But you can use this. You can use the two-way stretch bra, I guess padding. I'll put a link for where to get stuff. But basically you're going to use the kind of foam underneath your applique, but on top of your base garment. And what it's going to do is it's going to raise the applique a bit. It's going to give it a little bit of interest, a little bit of texture. If you're doing something that has a lot of texture behind the applique, it's going to prevent it from showing through on the applique. I used a form of this when I made my husband's Hela costume, where I was using foil for the applique, which shows any little ripple of texture underneath it, but it was on top of fishnet covered spandex. So if I hadn't appliqued it with the foam, it would show the fishnet underneath the foil. So for this, I'm just going to say, let's do a little heart. That's nice and easy. It's a really ugly heart. I'm really not good at this. And then I think I'll do like a smaller heart. I'll show it two layered. You don't need 2 layers, but whatever works. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut your applique out of your foam. I like to spray my pattern with repositionable adhesive. So I'm going to do that. And then you decide what's going to be your right side up. I usually like the light side best just because I'm usually appliquing in something light. If you do this over the black side, if that's applicable, it's going to change the color. You can see it to some degree. The other thing to mention is you need to decide which way your applique is facing. So hearts there's an obvious up. If this is on a garment, you always want to have the greatest degree of stretch going across the garment. So you're going to want to position your foam to be like that. So this way stretches a bit more this way than this way. So I will cut this out so that my hearts are the greatest degree of stretch is going sideways. And I'm not super fond of the way I cut this, so I'm going to actually cut a little bit different. Like a bit bigger. Just a rough idea of what we're doing, you know. I like how I started out with, I'm just going to do a simple heart. I can't do a simple heart. They're really ugly. You'd think after 40 years of costuming I'd get good at making certain shapes. But nope. So anyways, you've got this foam. You peel the patterns off. Ideally. Now if you were doing a single layer applique, what you're going to do is spray this side of it and place it down on the wrong side of your applique. Again, you're going to want to keep track of where your greatest degree of stretch is going if that's an issue. This is a very even 4-way stretch spandex, so for an applique it really doesn't matter. What I'm going to show though is a 2-layer applique. So what it's going to do is it's going to be padded with a thicker layer here, the 2 of them. So I'm first going to glue this down onto this and then glue this whole thing onto that. If you want to do a single layer, you can just ignore this part. So let's just say that this looks good. Let's imagine, because we've got imaginations. So say this is what I want my padded applique to look like. I'm just going to hit it with a bit more glue around the edges also. Now what I'm going to do is glue this down onto it. Now this can take some fussing because you're going to want to push it into the sides. And that's what you're going to do. Now, when you cut this out, you're going to want to cut just enough outside of the actual line so that this will be able to cover the sides when you sew it. So you're basically giving a little bit of a seam allowance that's about the height of the foam you're using. And this can be relatively rough, but just try to get it, you know, how you're doing it. And it doesn't have to be perfect because it's spandex and it will stretch to accommodate. The more accurate you can get off the bat, the less fussing you have to do later. So that's basically what we've got here. Now you see it's not holding tight against the edge of the second layer, like the top layer. That's okay because you're going to be stitching that down. So I'm going to hit that another time. Spray it really well with the glue. And now this is a piece of spandex that I've adhered to some lining just because whenever I'm doing a padded applique like this, I am using a lined spandex. I like bonding it to the lining because it gives a much better base, a stronger base. And I just find it gives a much better overall product. So I'm going to take my applique and just smash it down. You can pin if you want, you don't have to. I'm actually just going to trim it back a bit so it's not as annoying to show off as I'm doing this. And then I did not swap out the thread. We're just going to keep going. My cat's giving his opinions on the whole matter now. Okay, so as with usual for my applique, I do like to have the base in to keep it flat as possible. I'm going to use, so normally what I do is I'd use the second widest applique. Sometimes when I'm doing this, I'll use the widest, but this is a very narrow or very thin foam, so I don't think I'm going to bother. You can start with the upper applique if you want, or the bottom. It doesn't really matter. I usually start with the top just because it'll cement the whole thing down. So what you're going to do is you're going to ignore where this kind of tapers off to, and you're going to applique on the actual edge of the foam. And you're going to be stitching through the 2 layers of foam and the base below it. And it can be kind of hard to see where it goes, so just jam your fingernail in there if you need to. Just take your time and adjust your lighting if necessary. So I was going pretty rough with it, so it's not the greatest job. But I also don't want this to be a 40-minute video. So there you see you've got, you know, your 2 layers of padding. And now when you're doing the main, or if you're doing a single one, but when you're doing the applique onto the actual fabric itself, what you're going to do is make sure that this fabric comes down to the side and that you're stitching against the actual foam. So you're not curling it under, but you're curling it down and trapping it, because otherwise if you don't, you're going to see the foam that's underneath it. You don't want to do that. You just want to see the applique fabric. So as you go, just kind of press it with your nail to get in place. I did not do so great there. So that is a very messy job, but that's the basic idea. And then, as I said, you know, any bump underneath it, you're not going to see. And it just gives you a little bit more texture. I recently used this on an Ursula costume where her spiral, I guess, seashell necklace is over the applique and her necklace. So the pendant part of it. So I did the pendant part of it as a padded applique like this. You're not going to come across the need to use this very often, but it's a nice thing to have in your arsenal, just for those times when you are needing a little bit more, I guess, texture or height to your applique, or if you're putting an applique over something that's highly textured, like I was talking about. Anyways, that's what it is.